What is going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning into yet another episode of Yards Per Fantasy. And we have a special guest today. So I'm your host, Kevin Brumley, and our guest today is Chris Harris. Chris, how you doing?
Hey, Kevin. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, I appreciate you coming on, man. You're big time. I'm trying to work my way up where I can almost see you. I'm trying to get there.
Come on. That's fine. All that means is I'm old, dude. That's all that means. I'm old.
A wily veteran. Go with veteran. Sounds better.
Yeah.
No, so today I want to focus on some of the guys where there's mixed feelings about. Some of these guys are going to be high people in the draft. Some of them are, those ninth round guys that people kind of have mixed feelings about. So, the first guy that we keep talking about in our group chat for Yards Per Fantasy that I'm personally not 100% on the bandwagon is CEH. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's running back 7 right now. His ADP on Fantasy Pros is 19, and he's trending up. I'm not sold yet because I haven't seen him take a snap in the NFL. What's your feelings?
So RB7 is the number 19 pick. Wow. So, we should start this conversation by saying we're still in early August as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm not really looking at average draft position just yet. I usually on my podcast will start looking at it next week-ish kind of. So sometimes your viewers of this will be like, that dude's clueless. He doesn't know anything. I'm really not paying attention to the market. I'm much more paying attention to my own opinion, which you asked me here to talk about. So I don't know. I'm just prefacing by saying I'm surprised that the RB7 is going 19th. That means a lot of receivers are going between 7 and 19.
And I think baked into his ADP is the fact that before Damian Williams opted out, he was going a little bit later. So now he's probably trending somewhere closer to early teens,
12, something like that. Yeah. So I'll say it's a little rich for my blood, but I don't think it's insane. My body of work will tell you that I'm not going to lose my mind over situation in most cases because I think things change an awful lot. But getting to go play in an Andy Reid offense and with Pat Mahomes as the quarterback and knowing the playbook that they like to run, and also fortunately liking the player an awful lot, but kind of being with you, not having seen him play, like I think we like him, but I don't know. Like if he's going to go as RB7, it feels like it's the absolute tippity top of his market. And do we really it's the best he can really be is RB7 because he's not going to carry it 200 times. Probably he's much more of a receiving back and he's going to touch it 250 times, but maybe 100 of those are going to be receptions. So I would say I'm excited about him as a prospect. Was really excited about him really honestly as kind of like an NFL draft sleeper before he went to Kansas City, and then he goes to Kansas City. It's like, well, that's off. There's no value in Clyde Edwards-Helaire anymore. You're either deciding to take him at the very peak of what he could possibly be, or you're not taking him.
And that's exactly how I feel. Personally, like the hill that I'm kind of dying on is I would rather have Joe Mixon or Miles Sanders because they're going a little bit behind him. And, Sanders hasn't done it's only his second year, but I think he has tremendous upside. He's actually a really underrated, receiving back. And then Joe Mixon, we know that he has had a ton of talent. He hasn't really had the talent around him, especially last year, he was kind of playing by himself for most of the year. I just rather have those guys because, like you said, you're getting CEH at his peak. If best case scenario is he does exactly where you drafted him at, he's not going to exceed expectations at that point.
And I mean, I'll agree with you on Mixon 100%. I think I have Edwards-Helaire in a standard league 11. That sounds right. And I have Mixon 7. Among running backs, this is. So I'm 100% with you. Mixon, I mean, how much worse could the cast be than it was last year when those first 2 weeks were disastrous, but after that, holy moly, he was great. So we have no argument there. Sanders, I feel like if you're taking him near the first or early second round, I think that's also drafting him at the peak of what he might be. I didn't love his film last year. I can't argue that he doesn't have tons of athletic ability. He really does. The question for me about Sanders, and I don't think I'm ready to be conclusive about it. So the fact that you like Sanders, Kevin, doesn't freak me out. I see where you're coming from. He's really fast. His good plays are really, really good. And there should be lots of receptions there for him. I get the case for Sanders. I think the case against that I'll make, but not die on that hill, is he didn't really have great vision. He sort of ran into his blockers a bunch. He didn't see some holes. He needs to get better. What was on film from his first year probably isn't good enough to justify where he's being taken, but players get better. we would rather take a really great athlete and have him learn how to play and get better than someone who's just like a lunk. He's
Sure.
probably not going to get that much better. The question is for Sanders, is he a Lamar Miller? Is he a Tevin Coleman? It's just somebody who's athletically just real fast, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be good, but they just aren't. Like, there's just the thing. I mean, Miller was always fine. He was always RB17. He's fine, right? But he just had that thing where he could look great, but then he could also disappear. And that would be my only concern with Sanders. I know you didn't ask about Sanders, but it's great content, Kevin. It's great content.
No, I love it. And the thing I kind of do scale with Sanders is we talk about, he's being drafted on upside, is the fact that, he's behind Barkley in college and he started off behind Howard and Philly. And I felt like he got stronger as the year goes on, which means he was kind of learning on the job, which makes me excited for this coming year personally.
Yeah. Like, dude, what an athlete he is, right?
Oh yeah.
If we look back a few years from now and he didn't make it, we'll go, oh, Lamar Miller. I remember that.
Yeah.
And this is nothing really super against Lamar Miller, except for it always felt like for certainly the 3 years in Houston, like finally he was removed from the yoke of tyranny from Adam Gase and he was going to get a full workload and he was going to be RB9, right? And it's just not who he was. He was always RB17, 21.
Yep.
And despite the fact that he's a 90-something percentile speed guy. He's a great athlete. Like, we were saying all the same things about Miller that we're saying about Sanders. Now there was a vision piece missing, a football sense thing missing. And that's the warning sign that I saw on film, even towards the end of last year for Sanders. But there are also plenty of guys who came into the league with their hair on fire and not quite slowing the game down and really great athletes. And then everything slowed down for them and they went crazy. And he might do that. You're right.
No, I completely, I do agree with you that a few years from now, it could be, I knew it, or it was like, oh, I was wrong on that one.
Right.
Which brings me to my next guy. And
sure,
again, when we talked about the ADP, as far as it being 18 for CEH, this guy is a lower ADP, but he's actually higher on the running back list. And that person is Nick Chubb, who he's running back 12 right now. His ADP is 15. Okay. I think Nick Chubb is in that like elite echelon as far as talent.
Oh my God.
The problem is Kareem Hunt, a former rushing champ, one of probably the 3 best receiving backs in the league. We don't know with Kevin Stefanski what, we know it's going to be a run heavy scheme. That's what we saw in Minnesota. But what do we think? I like Nick Chubb and I draft him in my yards per fantasy league. I'm just not sure if he's going to have the touches to exceed that. So how are you feeling about him?
I mean, you nailed it. I think I have him 8 among running backs. So I guess a little higher than what you just described, but I'm going to take some receivers before I take him in the first round. I don't think I'm taking Chubb in the first round, and it breaks my heart. I mean, we all do all sorts of year-end lists. At the end of last year, we're giving our top 12 for 2020, right? Didn't know there wasn't going to be a mini camp. We didn't know there wasn't going to be a regular exhibition season, training camp, all that stuff. We just were blindly saying, here's what we think our top 12 is going to be. And Nick Chubb was in my top 5. He was right up there with the elite running backs. I completely agree about the talent. And that was because Kareem Hunt wasn't going to get pulled over for being stoned and not find a free agent deal somewhere else. This was the whole basis on which we were predicting top 5 for Nick Chubb. And everybody has someone else on their team. Everyone else has someone else on their depth chart, to varying extents. You worry, you don't worry about who else is there. Like, just 4 or 5 potential 250 to 350 carry backs in the league, and not there. That's not a requirement for you to be a first round pick anymore, but not all of them have Kareem Hunt on their depth chart. And last year it was only 8 games. So now we have a full season of him potentially also being a running back in addition to just being a receiver. I don't really pay that much attention to what coaches say that, it might be 50-50. I don't know. All I know is when you have another well above average, if not spectacular running back, but a very spectacular receiving back, the worry is that you get some 12 touch games. That's the worry.
And that's what I'm kind of concerned about. I like them both. As far as I like them both in real football more than I like them for fantasy purposes, because like I said, it scares me for fantasy purpose because you're kind of cutting off that tip top of the mountain. But if I was a Browns fan, Nah, I'm pretty
Oh,
jacked
sure.
up to have both those guys in my backfield.
Sure, for the full
Um,
year. Like, so let me ask you this question as I turn into the host. Like, what point do you have to get to overall in a snake draft for you to be like, yes, I'll pull the trigger and take Chubb?
So it's a 20 team league in my yards per fantasy league, and I
Okay.
took him at 16 because as I
Okay.
was entering like the end of the first round at the 16th overall pick, I was just like, it's too hard for me because like this guy has the ability where if Kareem Hunt, God forbid, blows out a knee, like Nick Chubb might be a top 5 player. You know what I mean? So that's why I was like, I got to get Chubb, even though he
Yeah.
might be around this spot. He might be a little bit lower, but he just has that next level ability to transcend the game.
Yeah. I mean, I am not looking right at my overall ranks. You can find them at harrisfootball.com if you want to see exactly where I have him, but I have him 8 among running backs. That's got to be 12, 13, 14, something like that among overall, which means if I'm picking towards the end of the first round, I probably won't take him if I can avoid it. But if he lasts to me in an early second round pick, I think I would take him.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking. And we talked about how there's some high level receivers this year, and let's talk about two of them that are on the same team, and that's wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 10. That's Chris Godwin at 6 and Mike Evans at 10. Now we know they're both just absurdly talented, right? Um, and now in town is no longer Jameis Winston throwing 30 times a season to the opposite team. It is the greatest quarterback we've ever seen. But my concern is, okay, Arians runs a vertical system. Tom Brady, it doesn't suit him. And then people are going, well, Brady's going to kind of call the shots. Well, with this COVID offseason, with the reduced training camp, is it easier to get one guy on board, or is it easy to take 10 other guys and flip them to his side of football that he's played for the past 20 years?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm slightly concerned about those two.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a change for the hilariously better for the Buccaneers, but for fantasy purposes, it's probably a change for the negative. I think it's fair to say it would be a change for a negative even if they'd had a full off season because Brady's just not going to be so ridiculous as
Sure.
Jameis was. Just bottom line is he's not going to just chuck up 50-50 balls and not really care what happens and not be losing by 3 touchdowns all the time. Like that's just not Brady's thing. Um, it probably takes the week by week peak away from Godwin and Evans. But it also, I mean, there are plenty of games. Hey, those guys had lucky seasons until their luck totally ran out and they both got hurt for the fantasy playoffs, right? It was like,
I was on Mike Evans.
yeah, it was like the greatest discovery in the world. It's the gold rush. I'm impenetrable. And then all of a sudden it just ended like in week 14 and you probably lost at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and along the way, even during that ride, there would be games where Chris Godwin would have 3 catches for 17 yards and they'd be losing by 3 touchdowns. And then he'd make a play in the open field and it looked okay. It wasn't a great way to make a living. It was a scary way to make a living, basically. And this will be I think the reason to still draft those guys, maybe not necessarily quite as high as you just said, although I have Godwin 7 among receivers. So as a second round pick, I'm okay. I think he's a little safer than Evans, maybe
I agree.
because Evans wins down the field more. And here's the thing. But anyway, I'll finish the thought and I'll get to the thing. The thing is, I'll take the smoother ride. There's still going to be 30 plus pass attempts, and they're just going to be better pass attempts. I'll take the quarterback who's better and who smooths things out, and I can be fairly certain that every week I'm getting minimum. The bad game for these two guys is going to be 5 for 60, and then we'll go up from there. Hopefully a touchdown, hopefully more yards on a broken play or whatever. What I was going to say is about Godwin. It's knee jerk and yet probably correct to say that he's the best fit for Brady. And the reason I say it's knee jerk is because, Brady threw it to Edelman in the slot a lot. And the truth is Godwin really isn't Edelman. They don't do the same things out of the slot. They're not going to run the same routes. Godwin didn't run option routes so much with Jameis Winston. Like it wasn't about having tight man coverage and if the defender's on my left shoulder, I'm going to turn right and vice versa. And Brady's going to be picture perfect with it, and it's kind of indefensible. It's not really Godwin's, at least that we've seen to this point, not really Godwin's game. And you made a great point, Kevin, that not having had an offseason to work together, that makes it all less likely that these really technical option routes are going to be the basis of it. What Godwin needs is zone defense, and he's in the slot, and he finds a little soft. He's really good at finding soft area, and after the catch, he's a monster. And that should play pretty well, even if it's not quite playing like it did with Edelman.
And I think that's, we had a conversation probably last week in yards per fantasy where one of the guys were like, I'm not a big slot receiver guy. I think it's easier to run out of the slot. And I'm like, it is and it isn't, because it is because you have a two-way go. You can go in or out, right, at the slot. But the thing is, being a slot receiver is you have to be even more sharp with your quarterback. That's what made Wes Welker and Brady and Edelman and Brady special, because they had this rapport off this option route, and you're also tied into blitz protection off of hot reads and sight adjustments. Just with that's I think the biggest problem with this reduced offseason is you don't have that rapport. And it's not like you had that rapport from the previous year. With a new guy, new receiver, are they talented enough to make it up? Yeah. I mean, that's that quarterback and two receivers, plus you have Gronk and OJ and Ronald Jones in the backfield. Like, I mean, it's a stupid talented team, and I couldn't have said it better myself when you said it's a better football situation than it is fantasy situation. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Let's go to a guy who is in might be fantasy hell last year, which is Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah.
I am a diehard Steelers fan, and I was missing the days of Cordell Stewart playing quarterback when I was watching Doug Hodges try to throw this ball. So Juju was pretty much irrelevant last year. And he had one game of like pretty good. The rest of the season was not so good. So Juju's wide receiver 9. His ADP is 33 right now. Okay. Ben is coming back, and I feel like, Ben at, let's say worst case scenario, Ben's 50% of what he once was. Is still significantly better than Mason Rudolph. And
not if he's 50. He needs to be 75 or 80. If he's 50, he's me.
So here's how I do look at it. So do you remember when it was Cincinnati versus Pittsburgh and the wild card game, and Ben dislocated his shoulder, and Landry Jones came in for one snap, threw a pick, and they put Ben in with one arm, not his throwing arm wasn't there, and he still let him for a game. That's how I kind of look at it. If Ben is just a game manager at this point, no longer the classic Big Ben of breaking sacks, putting it down the field, that helps the offense.
Yeah, sure.
My problem is, and I'm curious what, you do a lot of film breakdown, is I didn't see Juju getting a lot of separation last year, and he's best when he's in the slot. And now that AB is gone, he was working more on the outside, and I don't think that's his strength. He does have strengths. I still think we're kind of holding out hope that he could carry the production that he had when AB was there, plus pick up a bit of ABs. I'm not sure if I want him 33rd overall personally, even though that hurts me to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's not, again, you say wide receiver 10 and ADP overall 33?
Yes.
That seems crazy. It seems like a typo. How could the wide receiver 10 be going? There's not 23 running backs that are going before the 10th receiver, I don't think.
And again, I think it's like overall he's, clearly would be higher, but I think people are kind of leaning toward like what I'm saying, and they're taking him a little bit later. This is according to Fantasy Pros, but
all right, whatever. We should probably get let's not get bogged down in the overall ADP. Instead, I know for sure if he's wide receiver 10, I'm not taking him. That's too expensive. There's too many other receivers I would take in front of him. For me, he's really honestly more like 20. For a lot of the reasons that you said. I mean, is he I call him Hines Ward Jr. That's where he's best. He can win on the outside, but he's not going to, like you said, he's not going to win by separating. He's going to win by contested catches, being really physical, and short area quickness. And he has those things for sure, but he's not yet, at least, the technician that you see Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, these guys who basically just off the line with one step are open, even though they don't have the long speed either, right? They just have. Yeah, Keenan Allen's great. Keenan Allen's even a better example because he's even slower than those other guys on the dead run. But it's that basketball player first move. That's how Juju needs to win. And you're right. Last year he didn't, but it's also such a wreck of a situation that it's hard to know what was his fault. And then he was hurt, and he was playing hurt, and then he was just out, and it was a disaster season. For me, I think what it comes down to is too much uncertainty to feel like I'm going to go right back to valuing him the way we valued him at the beginning of last year, before Roethlisberger had, a foreign object implanted in his elbow to make sure it works, and before the offensive line got a year older and lost one more guy, and before Deontay Johnson turned out into somebody I'm really interested in at a cheaper price. I don't think I like, and teams aren't always telling us what they think of players when they make contract decisions, but the fact that Juju appears, headed somewhere else maybe next year also probably factors in my decision a little bit.
So, and I love how you brought up Deontay Johnson, because that is a guy that, again, I watch him all year. I try to watch every football game, but I'm a diehard Steelers fan.
Sure.
I love Deontay Johnson this year,
Me
and
too.
he's wide receiver 39. And this is like my biggest hot take is I think Deontay Johnson's going to lead Pittsburgh in almost every statistical category. I'd rather have him than Juju. Like, if I'm placing a bet, even though Juju has every opportunity to be the number one guy, and he should have every opportunity, I
Right.
just think Deontay Johnson brings something different to that wide receiver core. So if you want a piece of Pittsburgh's offense, that's the guy I'm going out and get. So
Yeah, I have Deontay Johnson lower ranked. I think it's fair to say that Juju should go earlier
sure.
because Johnson he's still a projection. He made a bunch of big plays, and I'm very there's nobody who I watched over the course. So I write this almanac, this player profile almanac that's got a profile of everybody. I write paragraphs about everybody, and I watch lots of film on everybody to get ready, refamiliarize myself with everybody. And nobody's rank went up higher after I watched film than Deontay Johnson. He was in the 50s, and now he's in the 30s in my receiver ranks. Now Juju's still 20, so I think value-wise, I prefer Deontay Johnson because I don't have to spend to get that with him. And I will back you up by saying if we fast forward to December and it turned out that Johnson was the one and Juju went back to being more the two, the possession receiver, still okay numbers, but the Antonio Brown type role is going more to Deontay, I'm with you. I won't be shocked.
Yeah, and that's like you said, it's all about value in fantasy football, and I feel like that's what wins you leagues is the fact that you can get a value pick. So even if Juju is the number one guy, but if I can get him a bunch of rounds later, then it just makes more sense. So speaking of kind of hills that we're going to die on, and me being a big Deontay Johnson fan, is two guys that I like that I just get raked over the coals with is Evan Ingram and Will Fuller. So I get the downside with both of them. It's
right.
obvious, it's clear.
Right.
But I want to focus on Will Fuller. His ADP is 81 right now. To me, it is baked in that he is going to get injured this season. And I know this season's weird. We probably won't play 16 games, but if we were going to play 16 games, I imagine if Will Fuller didn't have an extensive injury history, there's no way his ADP with his talent would be 81. So with that being said, as I think it's baked in that he's going to miss 2-3 games. And even with 2-3 games, I think he can live up to that or exceed that. He's that kind of talent. And you look at the other guy jockeying for positions, because Randall Cobb's a slot guy. He's not really going to work on the outside of the field as much. But Brandon Cooks, who has had 5 concussions in 6 years, and people want to throw Will Fuller off the side of the boat and say, hey, he's the human hamstring pool, right? But there's a difference between a soft tissue injury. I would rather live with that than somebody who's 1 hit away or 2 hits away from maybe his career being over. I hope that doesn't happen, but that is more concerning to me with Brandon Cooks than Will Fuller. And I think Will Fuller's a more talented guy personally.
I think Brandon Cooks is a more talented guy personally, but I think it's close enough. They're equally fast. I think Cooks is probably a little bit better football player, but sure, they're close enough. And that really, honestly, that's the problem with Fuller, is that Cooks is there. If it was Fuller and Kenny Stills and Randall Cobb, I would be all aboard. But there's no obvious reason to me why we're going to go through this whole season and Fuller is going to clearly every week be the A option, and then everyone else is going to be the B. I think it's going to go around and around and back and forth. And I have Cooks a couple of spots higher. I have them very close, but not real high. I mean, not higher than like late 20s. Maybe Cooks might be like 29 and Fuller's 32 among receivers, something like that. Precisely because I think they're almost interchangeable. If you were looking for the kind of player that Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller remind each other of, if they're on different teams, you'd point to the other one. They're almost the same guy. And I don't know about Brandon Cooks has never missed a game. He'd tap out of a Super Bowl. So, okay. I mean, I had this number of concussions in this many games. You're right. I don't, it's like saying that guy tore his ACL a couple times. I don't trust his knee. I don't know. It's hard for me to, from the outside, say I'm positive that I know how close Brandon Cooks is from being out of the NFL. I'm pretty sure I know how close Will Fuller is to missing games, because he always does. It's just something like year after year after year, something goes on, something happens. And this isn't to denigrate Will Fuller. It's just to say that I consider the risk of them kind of about the same. I consider them really close to being the same, to be honest.
And I agree with you. And I like the upside of either guy more
They do
than
have
what
a
they're
lot of
being
upside.
drafted because Watson's gonna throw the ball. I mean, he's the franchise, and I don't. Can we really trust David Montgomery or not David Montgomery, but
David
David
Johnson.
Johnson
Yeah. Yeah.
or Duke Johnson to carry the ball? I mean, they're going to be airing it out. Both those guys can receive, and I feel like they're going to be almost how Pittsburgh for a little while kind of used the short passes as runs, whether it's like little screens and stuff like that. I could see Houston trying to implement something like that instead of just a standard, you know, 21 personnel, 12 personnel, something like that, and just running the ball. I don't see a ton of that from Houston this year. My prediction. I don't know.
Sure. I mean, remember Pittsburgh did that last year out of necessity because they didn't have a quarterback who could actually throw it to a wide receiver, and they couldn't
Well,
run
they
because
did it with
everybody knew that.
they
But they
did it
threw
with
it. They
Ben with young Antonio Brown and when they
right,
had Martavis Bryant,
right.
they kind of give it to their athletes and be like, make a play.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be some of that, but I think some of that's going to go to David Johnson and Duke. Here's the thing about how Deshaun Watson is definitely going to air it out, and Russell Wilson plays in way too conservative an offense. Do you know how many average throws per game difference they had between them last year?
If I had to guess off the top of my head, I would one.
It's 33 per game for Deshaun Watson, 32 for Russell Wilson. Like, my point is that everybody throws. If your quarterback is good, even if your quarterback isn't good, he's going to throw. But if he's good and the receiver is good, I don't worry about it. I don't look at any team and go. I don't look at Terry McLaurin and go, sorry, they're just not going to throw enough. There's not good. Like, it's if Terry McLaurin were on Kansas City, I would like him more. There's 0% question about it. I don't love Dwayne Haskins, but every team throws. This
Sure.
is the NFL now. You almost have to worry more about which teams are going to run more than throw, and also you have to worry about which teams are going to throw their backs because that's a real advantage too. So I this is not me disagreeing with your overall point because I think they both represent freaky upside, as do many receivers. This is the problem. Is like, do they represent more upside than Tyler Lockett, than DK Metcalf, than AJ Brown? Then the problem is there's 80 of them. It's tough to pick them, but especially week by week upside, DFS best ball type guys. Woo, they're both. I don't have an easy time drawing a distinction between Fuller and Cooks, and I think they have week winning upside every week they play.
Sure, and I would agree with that. And it's funny you mentioned tearing your ACL a few times because the next guy, the last guy I want to talk about before we get to a rapid fire, is a guy that I'm terrified to take, and I'll explain why. And that's Todd Gurley. He's RB 15. Um,
He's
I
torn
just
his ACL how many times? I can't remember.
I, here's what terrifies me. It's not even the fact that he's blown out his knee. It's the fact that when asking the Rams last year, and I agree with you about coaches talk, when they're like, hey, we're going to feed this person the ball. I'm like, yeah, let me see it in a game and then come
Right.
talk to me.
Sure.
But when they would ask like, hey, how's Todd Gurley's knee? And they ask him, the coaches in Atlanta, you kind of get this like silent sort of shrug, like, I don't know. And that scares me. If someone blows out their knee, like when Adrian Peterson blew out his knee a handful of years ago, you kind of know the recovery period of an ACL. You don't know if that person's going to come back and lead the league in rushing like AP, but you have a general idea how players come back. Like usually wide receivers are better the year after. With Todd Gurley and the arthritis thing, it scares me because it's something so weird and tricky and unpredictable that he could wake up a Sunday morning and his knee's like, nah, I'm not with it today. That scares me, and I don't want to pay high draft capital for a guy who is clearly immensely talented. There's no doubt about it. I just don't
Right.
know if he can do it anymore.
Right. I'll counter that by saying I think he's probably fairly priced because what you just said is baked in price, and therefore, if you can get him where he's going, you wouldn't have if he was going fifth overall, you wouldn't have a decision. I wouldn't have a decision. We'd just be like, nope, no thanks, don't want to take on that risk. And so the decision we made for us, the fact that he's going where he's going is the point at which you go, well, and you have to just decide. You have to decide whether you're willing to take that risk. Much more concerning to me than whether Atlanta's coaches are being quiet when they're asked a question about his. And he didn't blow out his ACL, right? He did a long time ago, but this is a wear and
Sure.
tear thing. But much more concerning is that the team for whom he just ran for whatever 14 touchdowns and didn't have that great a season, but there were a lot of things wrong with the Rams that weren't related to Todd Gurley. And then most of them related to that offensive line. It was utterly horrible last
It
year.
was bad.
And his yards before contact was second to worst in the league of all qualified running backs. Like, there's lots and lots of things that were wrong. So it would have been pretty easy for the Rams to say, well, we're still on the hook for a big contract, and it really wasn't his fault. And, of course, he's our guy. We're bringing him back. And the fact that they didn't and ate a big chunk of money, and you could say this about Brandon Cooks too, and let him go somewhere else, and essentially they're paying him to play, paying a lot of money to play somewhere else. That to me it makes you go, it's not anything that we can really know, but do they know stuff about, like you said, what it took for him to get ready on game days? And maybe, the shaman that he had to call every weekend maybe isn't available anymore. And, it's just going to get worse. And they just didn't want any part of it anymore. But that risk is baked into why he's RB 14 or 15 or whatever, because he also, of course, we know has it in him to be the number one player in fantasy again. Of course he does. If it turns out that he's okay, he's the best power runner in the game. He's got the best goal line nose in the game. He's still 27 years old. Like, he's got it in him, the ridiculously huge, amazing upside, but he has the downside to wake up one Sunday and not be able to go like he did once for the Rams last year. And at some point, that it's a fair price, and somebody's just going to either have to take that chance or not.
So some other running backs that are going around there, and I'll ask you, Todd Gurley or this person. So Todd Gurley or Chris Carson?
Gurley. God, I mean, you talk about injury problems.
Yeah. Todd Gurley or James Conner?
Gurley still. Yeah.
Okay. Todd Gurley or Le'Veon Bell?
We're getting close. I still think probably Gurley. If Bell had any Bell almost falls into the same category, except for we don't think his issue was injury related. It was more surrounding cast related, but did they fix it? I'm going to still probably take the chance on Gurley, but that's real close.
Okay. Just a few guys that are around that similar spot that I think all three of those guys, I think I would take them over Gurley.
Right. You don't want that risk. It's understandable. Like if you just don't want any part of it, you're just like, listen, I get it. The person who winds up with Gurley in my league could wind up winning the league because I let him get Gurley. I'm still willing to take that chance. And that's, I think it's a hard argument to say no, Gurley should be going in the 6th round. And that's not what you're saying. Like, yeah, he's fairly priced. It's just scary as anything.
Sure. And let's get to like a few rapid fire questions. Who's an underrated quarterback and overrated quarterback in this year's draft?
Well, I don't know because I don't know the ratings, right?
Well, if you don't, just a guy that you would imagine would be going later.
Well, I don't have any idea. I don't know ratings. I really don't. I don't know who the ADP, so I don't know who, like, oh, I can't believe that guy's ADP is so low or high. I really am not. I swear I'm not looking. I know it sounds like this guy does this for a living, but I don't. I want my opinions to be my opinions.
I like it.
Up until mid-August, so I honestly don't know. I'm going to guess I have Aaron Rodgers higher than most people because he's great. And, yeah, well, I mean, I had Andy Behrens on my podcast this morning. He said he has Rodgers at QB 17.
Crazy.
And I was like, you have him where? I am higher than Andy Behrens has him. Andy, you jerk. He's one of my best friends. It's cool. We're good. We're good.
No, so to kind of just go through, I have Gardner Minshew, who's going as quarterback 24, I believe. I don't have it written down. I like him a little bit better than that. I actually like a lot of the later quarterbacks this year. Like Aaron Rodgers kind of speaks to that. I think on Fantasy Pros, he's 12 this year. And I think that's value.
Yeah, I have higher than that. Yeah, I still think he's a fantasy starter. I think it's been a little shaky, and the receiving cast still is what it's been, and I just think Aaron Jones probably doesn't get 19 touchdowns. There are points. It was a good team. He was a quarterback of an NFC Championship team who is a Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer, who is still at the height of his powers. They took a quarterback in the first round. I think that's honestly why people are down on him, because they took a quarterback in the first round, and we'll see. Next year he's either going to have completely bounced back and recovered with a 100-yard season and 30 touchdowns, or he's the quarterback of your, Jacksonville Jaguars or whatever.
Yeah. Speaking of the guy, kind of curious, like you said, you don't know the ratings, but I'm kind of a little bit lower on Drew Brees. So Drew Brees is at like QB 10. He's actually in front of Rodgers. He's in front of Brady. He's in front of Stafford. I think I like, maybe not Brady, but I like Rodgers and Stafford more than Brees this year, because just Brees can't really, I think eventually in New Orleans, the safeties are keep creeping down. They keep creeping
Mhm.
down because Brees just can't push it down the field like he once did. And he was never known for having a strong arm. Um, I'm not sipping the Kool-Aid Drew Brees this year. How you feeling?
I'm okay on Drew Brees actually. As a wait and get him at QB7 or something. I'm okay.
Okay.
I acknowledge what I don't think it's it's not Philip Rivers levels of gone as far as the
No,
arm goes.
no.
It's not quite like last year of Peyton Manning's career, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's not what they do. And I think the fact that it's not what they do, everybody knows it. And Michael Thomas doesn't go down the field that much and still caught 170,000 balls. The thing that's going to go when it goes for Brees is accuracy. If he can't be as pinpoint accurate, there's some throws on film that I refamiliarize myself with, and people can go to the YouTube channel. We just did like a top 7 quarterbacks for 2020 on youtube.com/harrisfootball, and I just picked out a couple of throws where you're like, that guy's covered. He has no business throwing that ball, and he puts it in the one tiny little area, 20 yards down the field. Maybe it didn't have a ton of mustard on it, but just it was right here, and anywhere else it would have been incomplete. There's no one who does it right now like Brees. But if
That's
he's
fair.
ready to be done, if the lack of arm strength leads to a lack of accuracy, it'll go so fast because you can't live like that if you're not perfectly accurate.
I just had I'm a big MMA fan. I just had Jimmy Smith on, and he is like a former UFC announcer, and we talked about being half in and half out, how it's the toughest thing to do in sports. You know, if you're thinking about your next gig in the broadcast booth, it is really difficult to do your job on the field.
I don't think
So
he is, though. I don't think he is. I think he's thinking about, I need another Super Bowl. I can't keep losing these. I can't keep having my team get knocked out in these ridiculous ways.
Oh
I
my,
think
talk about ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah.
I do think actually, if I was going to say like a team that is most benefited by like the COVID thing, and if the season's reduced some, I actually think the Saints are one of those teams that it really does help, because I think the Drew Brees doesn't need games really to get into rhythm, right? You know, he's a wily vet. And I think the season being reduced some, it means less hits on Drew Brees. And I think that helps Drew Brees and it helps that team, and less throws. I don't know.
Could be. I mean, I'm not smart enough to speculate on what's going to happen with this season. I have no idea. I'm just sort of blindly proceeding as though it's normal, and then we'll get to. I mean, really, I'm not, because there's a clear tendency to go, man, the rookies aren't going to have any experience at all. It might be a few weeks for them to get good, but the rest of it, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knows. I don't think Roger Goodell knows what's going on.
No, fair.
So I'll go with a running back that, again, since you don't know the ratings, I'll go with a running back that I'm higher on the most and a running back that I'm lower on the most. So Kenyon Drake is going just outside the top 10. I'm not paying that money for Kenyon Drake. I get it that he was in the abyss known as Adam Gase, which is, difficult, and he had a little bit of a coming out party when he went to Arizona. Still's not enough for me to, like, you're buying him at his pinnacle. And a guy you mentioned earlier, I like him. I don't love him, but Raheem Mostert's going like 9-10 spots ahead of Tevin Coleman. And I'd rather just wait and get Tevin Coleman, because I think there's going to be more of a split. Tevin Coleman, we know that Shanahan likes him. So I don't know. I just rather wait on him personally.
I don't know.
Well, he brought him in from Atlanta.
Sure, and then he didn't use him last year. Like, it seems like my most recent experience of Tevin Coleman is, I don't want Tevin Coleman at all. But by the same token, you're right. I have no idea what he's going to do. It wouldn't shock me. It's never terrible advice to say, if you don't know what's going to happen, take the cheaper guy. That's not at all bad advice. I think that's very fair. As far as Kenyon Drake goes, I have him RB 14, I think, and it makes me sick. I'm telling you, there's like, I don't know, 10 running backs that I don't feel sick about, maybe 9. And then it's just nausea city. If I could get in any draft or any auction situation, if I can get 2 of those, say, top 9 running backs, I feel way better than having to rely on Kenyon Drake as my RB2, even though it absolutely could work out. They all have nightmares associated with it. It's why all those names you kept listing, Todd Gurley's a nightmare. He's a nightmare. I don't know what's going to happen. But Le'Veon Bell's a nightmare, and Kenyon Drake's a nightmare. And who else did you say? Like, yeah, they're all nightmares. I don't know what's going to happen to any. So Drake is another one of these guys that we were just talking with Miles Sanders, another one of these freaky athletes. Why aren't you better at football for years and years and years? And did you suddenly get good because you had a 4-touchdown game against Cleveland in like a dead man walking game? It's a real question. I will say that there was a very clear difference on film between David Johnson running the ball early in the year and Kenyon Drake running the ball later in the year, and Kenyon Drake was better.
Sure.
Like he was.
I'd agree with that.
He definitely was better on film, finding holes, looking explosive, making plays, not just in the receiving game. But if you just told me, especially if you're saying he's going RB10, I'll be like, nope, we'll figure something else out. It's not outrageous to me, but I don't feel like I need to reach for Kenyon Drake.
So a receiver that I like this year, because I feel like just by regression of being this insanely efficient team on really both sides of the ball, I like Hollywood Brown this year. And I get it, man. People are like, okay, he's about the size of an 8th grade boy. I get that. Okay. But he's got world-class speed. And I think like people kind of sleep on him. Like he is a worker. Like he's a pretty decent route runner for being young, for being a small guy. He doesn't really get pushed off his spots as much as I was going to anticipate. Like when he came in at the combine and was like 162 pounds or something, I was worried he was just going to get manhandled at the line of scrimmage. He's better than what I thought. You hear reports. I've seen his videos. He's up to like 185 or something like that. You don't know. Once the season goes on, you're going to drop weight. I don't put any stock into it. But I do like his upside this year with Lamar Jackson. And after a while, right, with Lamar Jackson being your franchise, you don't want to run him 15 times a game after a while. You still want to have that in your back pocket, but after a while, like you don't want to have 3 MVP type seasons from Lamar Jackson and be like, well, it was fun while it lasted. Next. That's tough. I mean, I guess that with the Ravens philosophy,
unless you want to win a Super Bowl, like you should probably just do the best you can do right now. I'll say about Marquise Brown, he was never going to get bumped in the NFL. He's too fast. It's like trying to bump Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill would love you to play press coverage. Please try. And I think that's the same thing with Marquise. I think you have a great point that he's not. We don't need to worry about how little he is. We have to worry about how little he is if he starts, running a ton of crossing routes, like getting nailed by linebackers, and it's just not what they're going to do with him. Very clearly, it's not what they're going to do with him because he's little. And otherwise, I'm with you. The size probably doesn't matter that much. I'd say in a different situation where I trusted the quarterback more as a thrower and they potentially needed to throw more. Although, you're right. From year to year, things change. So we can't unilaterally say that the Ravens are a 22 attempts per game team. Like, we don't know. Maybe they won't be. The last time I saw Lamar Jackson, his great big arm that he doesn't always use mechanically the soundest way. And he had an awesome looking statistical year that fell out from under him in a huge spot. He played really bad in that Tennessee game. And I think what Marquise Brown is likely to do is to likely be just like Will Fuller and just like Brandon Cooks and just like Deshaun Jackson and just like all of the boom bust feast famine. If I draft him, I got to play him. And 4 games a week, 4 games a season, I'm gonna be so happy. And 12, I'm gonna be like, well, that wasn't awesome. Not through any, his path to being more than what I just described is Tyreek Hill. We're going to build the offense around always, making sure a double-digit ball in his hands every single week. It doesn't matter if it's a jet sweep. It doesn't matter if it's a wide receiver screen or a pitchback or whatever, like ball in his hands double-digit times. And the problem with Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, Deshaun Jackson, all those guys is a nice problem to have, but it's that their teams aren't doing that. They're fast and they're going down the field, but their teams aren't doing that. I have to be, I guess, sold that the Ravens are going to change things around and do that. And if they do, you're right. He's got such big upside.
So we talked about I don't think the Ravens can run Lamar Jackson 15 times a game. And I get what you're saying. You're trying to go out there and win now. I think the reason they haven't won a playoff game in the past 2 years is for the fact that they're one-dimensional. To a certain point, the game kind of slows down when you get into the playoffs, right. And it's to the point where they fell behind in Tennessee they had some bad breaks. I mean, let's be honest. There were some receivers dropping balls in that game. They fell behind, and then they're doing something that they haven't done all season. So I feel like the next progression for the Ravens to be even better, because that team is crazy stacked. Like I was looking at their roster, that team is absolutely insane, both sides of the ball. But isn't it getting Jackson comfortable in 3 to 5 step drops when it doesn't really matter? Like, you know what I mean? Early in the season, if you drop a game, they're still probably going to win the North or at least make the playoffs. I mean, it'd be insane.
Steeler fan. You're a bad Steeler fan. That's not cool, man. You make a good point, except for what if he can't do it? So far, he hasn't really proven that he can do it. he's not really proven to me that he's much of a run a typical drop back kind of passing game, and nor will he have to for much of early part of his career, nor did Cam Newton, particularly in the more healthier part of his younger part of his career. Like, it can absolutely work. But like, every argument about Cam Newton, every negative argument about Cam Newton all those years, even when he went to a Super Bowl, is, let's see, he's a front runner. Let's see if he gets behind, if he's got to throw, does he have it in him to just stand back there and hit? And to some degree he could. To some degree, I think I would take prime Cam Newton as a throwing quarterback over year 2 Lamar Jackson, which is no real slam on Lamar Jackson. That's just he hasn't grown up yet, and so you might be right. Like, if he can do it, then broadening the game and not making it a glorified college offense maybe in their future. It may be. But if he can't, I think they still want to win this year.
That's true. Just something I was thinking about.
Sure, yeah.
And
I don't mean to disagree. I'm sorry if I came across disagreeable. Like, I think I would hesitate to say the reason I'm going to take Marquise Brown is because I'm sure they're going to throw it 35 times a game because they have to turn. Like, I wouldn't go that far, but what you're saying could actually come to pass. It makes a lot of football sense.
A guy that, this is honestly, I don't have a feel for this, and I'm not predicting this by any means, but do you think there's any chance that Julio Jones takes a slight step back? Like, Julio Jones is getting into his early 30s. He's been a guy, he plays through a lot of games, like much how like Cooks is, where Cooks is constantly kind of beat up, but he's always on the field. Julio's been like that. I don't know if I want to take him that high this year, because now he has Gage around him, he has Ridley around him. I'm kind of down on the Falcons this year, to be completely honest with you. And I don't know, you can't be Superman forever, right?
I personally am okay taking him like at 3 among wide receivers, but I get the argument. So for the Almanac, I did a research project just talking about age 31 receivers and can they give you sort of wide receiver 1 production, which, we don't need. The person that we take as the 3rd receiver, which is probably a late first round pick, doesn't need to finish as the 3rd receiver, but he needs to finish as a wide receiver 1 or it's a bust, right? I need to feel like I'm putting my money in the bank among receivers. Running backs, I'm willing to take a little bit more of a chance. Let's scream and hope for some upside. And I recognize that they get hurt and it's riskier. But last year, notwithstanding, when half the top 12 wide receivers puked on their shoes, normally you view taking the receiver in the first round as, okay, I'm going to put my money in the bank there. It's going to T-bill. It's going to own a little bit of interest, but it's going to be good. But, he's going to be safe. And so having looked back at the last 20 years or whatever, at age 31 or older, receivers who were drafted as wide receiver 1s, and did they finish as wide receiver 1s? And there's a lot of them. Over the last 10 years, there's Andre Johnson did it a bunch of times. Jordy Nelson did it once. Calvin Johnson did it. No, Calvin Johnson didn't because he retired. But there were 14 or 15 just in the last decade. So I don't think you'd say unilaterally, and you're not saying that the age immediately takes him out of the running. Like, I'm positive he falls off a cliff kind of thing. There's a lot of good players around him, and there are people who love Calvin Ridley this year. I've heard from those people. Last I saw Julio, he was still ridiculous. Yeah, he was still faster than everybody. Remember the Eagle game? That was a Monday night game, I think.
Yep.
Where it's like a 4th and 1 with about a minute to go, and they throw him a little out route, and that's not the part that's amazing, but he got some good blocking and then just was gone. Like, whoa, that dude could still run. It's possible that's gone away, and if it's gone away, it's a problem, because it does feel like double-digit touchdowns. It's just not what Matt Ryan does to any single receiver. He throws it to whoever's not covered. He doesn't really force it in. So there could be some concern. I don't have the big concern, but I understand what you're saying. I will say also, though, if we could ever get to the point, we might not because Ridley's there and he's pretty good, but if we could get to the point where Ryan was with Julio in December last year, they went crazy together. He just, on film, it was totally different. Ryan was like, I'm just going to throw it to Julio. He just
why not?
over and over. Well, why not? It's like all the rest of their career together. They never really did that.
Yeah.
But in December last year, they just were like, oh, he's double teamed. I don't care. And that's when you saw like 13, 15 targets, 13, 11, and 182 yards. And I just don't think Julio's covered when he's covered. I don't care if a safety rolls his way, throw it to him. And if they ever did that, oh man, then I'm more into Julio rather than less.
I think I would take Tyreek Hill over Julio this year just because of the system.
Me
But
too.
it's
I have
interesting.
Tyreek
I'm
too.
just
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just kind of curious what this year looks like for him.
Yeah.
As
I mean,
far
sorry, I have 5 receivers that I go, they're better than everybody. I don't want anybody. If I can get one of those 5, it's great. And you said it's Thomas, it's Hill, it's Julio, it's Devontae Adams, it's DeAndre Hopkins. And I think you could honestly, I mean, everybody's gonna have Michael Thomas 1 because the workload was so crazy, and he's really great. But honestly, like, you could make a case for any of the 5 of those to be the 1.
That's true.
It's hard for me. Are those your top 5? Would you say?
I would say, yep, those are my top
Yeah.
5. And I
It's
actually
hard to.
think I would go Thomas 1, Adams 2, Hill 3, Julio 4, and then 5 Hopkins. I mean,
Totally
but like you
defensible.
said, you can really just put them in a basket
Yeah.
and just pick one out and be like, all right, that's what I'll take.
Yeah, I think it's really true. And I think, once again, like, there are, again, if there's, I don't know, eight or 9 running backs who don't make me sick, and maybe like 5 wide receivers don't make me sick, I would love to get 2 of those players,
Sure.
overall in a snake draft if I could. Maybe if you're picking McCaffrey or Barkley at 1 or 2, you're maybe not going to have that option. But if I can, it at least psychologically feels like I'm getting away with something, because after that, everybody's a question mark. I mean, I have Galladay 6 and Godwin 7, and they both give me heart palpitations to think about them being my wide receiver 1. I would love them as wide receiver 2s, and they probably should be drafted as wide receiver 1s, but they could go bad. Like, I think they're immensely, immensely, immensely talented, but they don't feel safe to me.
Yep, and I would completely agree with that. There's a ton of players this year where you're just like biting your nails watching the game, being like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And we'll get to the tight end position, and then we'll get ready to wrap it up. Tight ends, I think, really interesting this year. Clearly, you have Kittle and Kelsey. They're 1, 2, and then it's a few steps back. Then you have your Mark Andrews, Waller, Ertz.
I might put Ertz 3. I might put Ertz in the same group.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I might even say Ertz and Kittle, or right. I think Kelsey's the best, and then Ertz and Kittle are pretty close for me. I mean, Kittle's better. Kittle's a 2, but I don't think it's as big a gap. Andrews for me at 4 is a bigger gap to Ertz.
I think I could agree with that. I get behind that. But there's a lot of guys in that 10 to 20 range where kind of like Mark Andrews last year, right? And a guy, there's a few of them. Like, I like Gesicki, but the guy I really like that I think is going to step up is Hawkinson for Detroit. I love him this year. That's a guy that I'm thinking he's too good. He's too talented, and he kind of reminds you of that mold of like a Kittle. Not quite as athletic, but just good blocker. You can put him all over the field. And I just think he's too talented. He has Stafford, the gunslinger, back there. I just think he's going to outlive his ADP and whatnot. Is there any tight ends that, and again, I'm aware that you don't know the rankings, but is there?
I can tell you where I have them, though. I can tell you where I have them. For me, it's Hawkinson and Fant are the 2 unproven guys who I'm able to get in my top 12. So I would consider them, if I'm waiting at tight end, which is usually what I recommend. It's usually what most people recommend. Let everybody else take the big names and spend the big money on the non-scarce position, and let's see if we can catch lightning in a bottle like we did last year with Andrews or Waller. For me, the 2 would be Hawkinson and Fant. Hawkinson was awesome for week 1. He sure was great against the Cardinals. And then after that, he was very disappointing. It was frustrating to watch that film back again and realize how close he was to a bunch. He got in September, he got a bunch of red zone targets. He got a bunch of and he dropped a couple, and he had a couple knocked down, and they just kind of got away from him. And then he got hurt halfway through the year. And then Stafford gets hurt. It doesn't matter anymore. But I've got him 8 maybe, and I have Fant 9. Fant is way less of a polished player, I think, than Hawkinson was when I saw them in their respective rookie years. But it's cool. Like, Darren Waller isn't that polished either. If you're fast and you're big and you're running down the seam with your arm up, you can make a bunch of big plays. Nobody probably gets volume like Waller did last year, except for the very tippity top guys.
Sure.
Even Waller probably doesn't get volume like that. And so I wouldn't predict it for Fant either, but I think he can make big plays. But you're right. There's so many basketball player type athletes who haven't yet proved it, who are now getting a chance. Jonnu Smith, Ian Thomas, Mike Gesicki, Irv Smith, tons of guys.
Yep.
And I don't know that this is why you should definitely wait at tight end. This is, If you're in a format that allows you to wait a tight end, get who you get, there's going to be a lot of give and take. There's going to be a lot of like, we all saw that Ian Thomas might be good. None of us necessarily drafted him because we didn't really know. But look at that. That offense is pretty committed to give him 8 targets a game. Great waiver ad, like perfect.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm with you on that one. And
Yeah.
to kind of get you out on this, is there any guys that, from what you've heard from other people, that you're like, I'm really high on this person, or you kind of imagine that the general consensus might be a little bit lower on this person, but you're higher on this person, or vice versa?
It's the ADP question.
No, but like, you said you talked to.
I do. I talk to them all. I have a guest on every single day, and I do get surprised. I mean, I'm surprised that Miles Sanders is being treated as a first round pick. There's no chance I would take him there. So there's one. We already talked about him, but I think that's true. Yeah, I'm sure. The open-ended question, I just, like, think of every player in the league. Who do you like more than everybody else? Who else has come up in conversations? Many, many, many people. Devin Singletary. I would say it seems like from what other people say, I'm higher on Devin Singletary than the market seems to be. And so like, if you gave me the choice right now, I would agonize over it because I don't think it's a no-brainer at all. But I actually would take Devin Singletary over Miles Sanders. And that's
really
clearly not what the market's saying. Yeah, I think I have Singletary like 16 and Sanders 17 among running backs.
That's that hot take. I like it.
Well, it's not a hot take. It's just.
I think it's a hot take. I mean, Singletary. Like, I like Singletary. Like, I was surprised Buffalo went out and got Moss because I thought Singletary was extremely efficient when he touched the ball last year.
Uh-huh.
So it made me really surprised they went out and got Zach Moss. But I feel like I'm the only person that thought that. Like, but I don't. I would question what percentage of people would have Singletary over Sanders.
Oh,
I would. My guess would be like 1%.
Yeah, it sounds like it's low from what other people are saying, from what I say on the show. This is about, I don't think that many people would get outraged by me saying, yeah, I think Singletary is a pretty strong RB2. I think most people would be like, pretty strong, might be strong for me, but okay. I have him 20, you have him 16, that's cool. The hotter take is Sanders, because Sanders is suddenly now being taken as the RB8 or 7 or 6 or something. Like that for me is pure aspiration. And it could work out because I keep saying this every show I go on. I keep saying this, like what David Montgomery does in his first year, what Miles Sanders does in his first year, it doesn't doom them forever to being exactly that player. But the player that Miles Sanders was, I don't care, you're talking the end of last year, the beginning of last year, anything last year, the players Miles Sanders was, he is not a first-round fantasy pick. So we're projecting him to get better, to be a first-round fantasy pick. And I think a lot of it is people falling in love with the depth chart and falling in love with knowing that they're sure exactly what workload he's going to get and all that. And that for me is the Alex Collins argument. For me, that's the, like, who else is their argument? And my thing is, like, if you make enough mistakes, if you fumble, if you don't know where you're going or whatever, there's always someone else. Hasn't the NFL proven that to us? Can Miles Sanders, Le'Veon Bell, his first year was a 240 something pound, slow, not very exciting player for Pittsburgh, went away, came back, lost 20 pounds, was, unbelievable. So suddenly, like, had all this extra quickness in addition to being strong. Guys do that. And from year 1 to year 2, it could happen. I'm just not going to pay that price for Sanders.
Yeah. So, and I agree with you. Sanders is the hotter take, like having him down that low. But I did a video on Devin Singletary, and like I got roasted, dude. I make videos, like I break down football stuff. I interview some of the high school elite athletes for Clemson, USC, all that fun stuff. And I've never received the kind of flack that I do for fantasy videos. Like fantasy videos, I get roasted on. I was like, I like Singletary. They're like, Singletary's terrible. Singletary's terrible. Josh Allen's better running back than Singletary. And I'm just like I don't, like, one, like, part of fantasy is it's opinion based, and two, like, what evidence do you have?
Right.
It's
well,
amazing.
They don't need it. In fantasy, in NFL analyst type circles, there's a little more shame. There's a little more like, I'm going to be held accountable for this opinion. And in fantasy, it's in one ear out the other. And I made a great call on someone else, right? It's not really, there's not a lot of accountability. So people just go, blah. Like, I think anybody who watched Devin Singletary actually play last year, and I didn't see your video, I apologize for that, but I bet saw a lot of the same things I did. Anybody who did film study on Devin Singletary last year had to come away impressed. Any anti-Devin Singletary argument is yeah, but Zach Moss, yeah, but never got carries inside the 5. Yeah, but they didn't throw it to him. Like, it's all circumstantial stuff that can absolutely change from year to year, and usually does. This notion that, I'm really excited for Dalvin Cook because he caught 50 balls last year. Did anybody watch the 50 balls that Dalvin Cook caught?
Yeah.
They were little dump offs.
Yep.
It's awesome because he made, like, but there's no thought. Why can't Buffalo do that? Put a little more on the kid's plate. Suddenly now he's receiving. Like, I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but I like him enough as a player that if he did, I think he'd really succeed.
Yeah, and like I feel like the Thanksgiving game, I was like was a real coming out. Like I think Singletary did really well against a good front seven. He was doing well all season, but I'm like, oh, this is a stout team, and he did well, man, under some bright lights. So, but yeah, like I made a Ronald Jones video before, like right after Keyshawn Vaughn was drafted, and like I literally the first 30 seconds I go, I'm going to get so much hate for making a Ronald Jones video. As soon as I post it, someone goes, Ronald Jones sucks, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like you didn't even watch the video.
Well, crazy. That's the point. That's the point is that there is I mean, we could have a whole other philosophical conversation about the internet, but there's a lot of very, very tough, there's a lot of tough guys on the internet.
Sure.
Right? A lot of tough guys on the internet, and we'll just leave it at that. I respect you, and I mean the whole point is anybody. I think you have a leg up just because anybody who is going beyond the box score, just going, at least having an opinion on what the players themselves are capable of, to me has more staying power as an analyst because all it takes is hard work. It's not like you don't have to be a genius to watch Joe Mixon and go, oh, wait a minute. This guy's awesome. Like, holy cow, this guy's amazing. Like, yeah, no, his team isn't that good. And yet he still had 1,000 yards and now 8 touchdowns and blah, blah, blah. Like, I think the best analysis comes from sticking to your guns on talent for sure.
I like it. And Chris, thank you so much for coming on. I had a great time talking to you. Who doesn't just like talking the football? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It was really fun to talk to you, and it was a pleasure to come on.
Do you have anything to plug? Plug your channel and your social media?
Sure. I mean, the channel is youtube.com/HarrisFootball. I'm at HarrisFootball. I do a podcast 5 days a week. The podcast actually isn't simulcast on the YouTube channel. They're separate, church and state. So the podcast is an hour, 5 hours a week. It's an hour every day. And the YouTube channel is doing well. And we have lots of videos to show you, like, breaking down players and talking about why we like them and stuff. And yeah, I'd love to have anybody come on over and discover, and then leave comments in which they decide that I'm an idiot after 30 seconds. That would be great.
Absolutely. No, great content. I personally check it out. It's really fun stuff, and it's just a little bit different perspective with like the film stuff. And I'm a big fan. So definitely check it out, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.